This recording connects the ambitions, content, and history of my course on transformative medical advances to a broader aim of promoting progress. I'm recording this video in my decidedly unprofessional home studio in Cambridge, Massachusetts. It's based on a talk I gave last month at IMD in Lausanne and early at Nova Medical School in Lisbon. I'm immensely grateful to IMD's former president Jean-François Manzoni and IMD's research dean Stéphane Michel for the opportunity. My mic, camera, computer, and I are ancient, so please excuse the unpolished quality. To answer Stéphane's question about how I have come to teach a course in transformative medical advances, I will start with Herbert Simon's parable of an ant on a beach. Simon writes, "We watch an ant make his laborious way across a wind and wave molded beach. He moves ahead, angles to the right to ease his climb up a steep dunelet, detours around a pebble, stops for a moment to exchange information with a compatriot. Thus, he makes his weaving, halting way back to his home. It is a sequence of irregular angular segments, not quite a random walk, for it has an underlying sense of direction, of aiming toward a goal. He has a general sense of where home lies, but he cannot foresee all the obstacles between. He must adapt his course repeatedly to the difficulties he encounters and often detour uncrossable barriers. His horizons are very close, so that he deals with each obstacle as he comes to it. He probes for ways around or over it, without much thought for future obstacles. Viewed as a geometric figure, the ant's path is irregular, complex, hard to describe. But its complexity is really a complexity in the surface of the beach, not a complexity in the ant. An ant viewed as a behaving system is quite simple. The apparent complexity of its behavior over time is largely a reflection of the complexity of the environment in which it finds itself. My life's journey has been like the ant's. It may seem meandering, possibly directionless if you look at my books and articles. But there are common themes, a general direction spanning enterprise, innovation, hustle, uncertainty, and now emphatically optimism about progress. This 440-page tome, Lessons from Transformative Advances, is the centerpiece of my program. You can download it for free from my website or from SSRN. Printing and binding is your responsibility. My marketing mission is to give away these materials. I'm eager and willing to provide all the help I can to anyone who wants to use them. If any of you take me up on my offer and starts using any of these case histories, I will say this session was a great success. I start with my current locus, where I am. I will then describe how I got here. Finally, quo vadis, where to go next. I taught entrepreneurship for 35 years. It naturally influences the course I'm now teaching on transformative medical advances. The goal is to encourage and guide innovations in healthcare and beyond, the beyond is important, by cultivating and broadening attitudes, knowledge, and skills. The goal is very similar to and adapted from my entrepreneurship courses. I want to promote the romance of progress, the adventure of progress, not just the material benefits. I also want to make my students aware of and open to the diverse opportunities in what I call a massively multiplayer game. Progress is an essential feature of modern society. Even when aimed at material advances, it is not merely a materialistic phenomena. There's a romance to it. It can make life an adventure. Progress creates diverse opportunities, and not just for entrepreneurs or technical wizards. The massively multiplayer game can make life an adventure for anyone who wants to play in it. Here's a memorable scene which some of you may remember from Dead Poets Society.
Look at Mr. Pitt's eye. Like 19th century literature has nothing to do with going to business school or medical school, right? Maybe. Mr. Hopkins, you may agree with him, thinking, yes, We should simply study our Mr. Pritchard and learn our rhyme and meter and go quietly about the business of achieving other ambitions. A little secret for you. Huddle up. Huddle up! We don't read and write poetry because it's cute. We read and write poetry because we are members of the human race. And the human race is filled with passion. Medicine, law, business, engineering, these are noble pursuits necessary to sustain life. But poetry, beauty, romance, love, these are what we stay alive for. To quote from Whitman, "Oh me, oh life, of the questions of these recurring, of the endless trains of the faithless, of cities filled with the foolish, what good amid these, oh me, oh life?" Answer, that you are here, that life exists and identity, that the powerful play goes on and you may contribute a verse. That the powerful play goes on and you may contribute a verse. What will your verse be?
I find this scene inspiring yet problematic. What will your verse be is a great question, an inspiring question. That anyone can contribute a verse to the powerful play of life is uplifting. But devaluing medicine and the law is troubling. Are these merely pursuits necessary to sustain life? When Whitman's poem was published in 1855, the US was young and dynamic. In earlier times in Europe, the romantic life was exclusionary for kings and queens, conquerors and crusaders. The powerful play was of wars, rebellions and revolutions. In Whitman's time, the powerful play was of industrialization, of material progress, of new cities and railroads. Anyone could contribute a verse. Anyone, an engineer, accountant, lawyer, physician or nurse. Anyone could contribute to progress. That was true in Whitman's time. That's even truer now with the democratization of innovation. That was the attitudinal message of my entrepreneurship teaching. That's the attitudinal message of my transformative advances course. Moving on to the knowledge and skill goals. Historical patterns and pathways are at the core of the knowledge I target. History may not repeat itself, but it rhymes. As Frank Knight, the hero of my book on uncertainty and enterprise, I have to put in a plug for my book, said, "In an absolutely unchanging world, the future would be accurately foreknown, since it would be exactly like the past. The existence of any problem whatever in connection with life or conduct depends on the future being different from the past, while the possibility of the solution to the problem depends on the future being like the past." History teaches that transformative advances result from a multi-period, multiplayer game. The process evolves like the path of an ant on a beach. It's partly deliberate and planned, and partly emergent and accidental. In Charles Darwin's language, it combines artificial breeding and natural selection. As in Whitman's powerful play, advances combine many verses. Some poets are celebrated, most are unsung. Transformative advances combine many kinds of knowledge from many sources. Abstract principles derived from overarching values in scientific knowledge can shape the overall concepts. But principles aren't enough. You also need technologies derived from disciplines such as engineering, medicine, and business. These technologies help turn concepts into concrete workable designs. Similarly, implementing the design of a new product or process requires domain-specific expertise derived from direct experience, observation, or tried and tested conventions. Moreover, and I cannot emphasize this enough, engineering, medicine, and business aren't the offspring of science. They're cousins, not dependent children. Engineering isn't applied physics and chemistry, As the physicist Michael Longuet wrote, until 1850, the steam engine did more for science than science did for the steam engine. Medicine isn't applied biology or biochemistry. Marketing and accounting aren't applied social science. Additionally, in protracted multiplayer advances, combinations embody knowledge and ideas developed a long time ago, sometimes decades and decades ago, by now forgotten individuals. Many of the foundational techniques of mammography were developed in the 1950s by a radiologist working in a Uruguayan hospital. Uruguay in the 1950s? Who could imagine? The techniques were then refined and codified by Charles Gros, a French radiologist in Strasbourg, and Robert Egan, an MD Anderson radiologist in Houston, more than 60 years ago. Dan Bricklin, my business school classmate, invented VisiCalc, the first spreadsheet, when we were second-year MBA students in 1979. Who remembers Bricklin or VisiCalc? Or Mitch Kapor, whose Lotus 123 dethroned VisiCalc in the 1980s. Much of the prior knowledge is a free good, a gift to today's innovators, just as today's innovations will be gifts to future generations. The creative synthesis of many ideas and knowledges in the plural, involves many tasks. My framework spans 8 common tasks. These include goal setting. What is it that you want to do? What problem do you want to solve? You have to form conjectures, make guesses about how to achieve your goals or solve your targeted problem. You have to evaluate and test your conjectures and codify your results, and so on. The tasks are not neatly partitioned. They are interdependent and intertwined. An abundance of techniques, frameworks, and protocols are available, and more are developed by the day. But what is available is overwhelming. Worse, the techniques are often oversold or completely useless. Therefore, the goals of my course include some knowledge of what is out there and skill in selecting and adapting what is available. I rely mainly on case histories. Each is about 15 pages long. Many are shorter and a couple are longer. They assume no prior technical knowledge. Even if you knew nothing about medicine, if you knew nothing about the subject matter, you should still be able to understand what is going on if you pay attention. I use mini cases and brief video clips to lighten things up. Change the medium and break the tedium, one wise teacher used to tell me. Guests are an important feature. They enliven the class, and more importantly, they can inspire the students. If a guest is unavailable, I use videos of previous guest appearances. I guide discussions, but I do not use the quote-unquote Socratic method. By many accounts, Socrates was an annoying interlocutor. He would ask you question after question to show you why you were wrong. I do not promote any right answer. There are no right answers to the questions I raise. In fact, I prefer to say as little as possible in class. I emphasize peer-to-peer learning and collective synthesis. Most of my case histories are from a list compiled by Victor Fuchs and Harold Sachs in 2001. Fuchs, a Stanford health economist, and Sachs, a Dartmouth professor of medicine, had compiled a list of the top 30 advances between 1975 and 2000 that internists in the United States said had had a significant impact on patient care. Not the most promising or highest potential advances, but rather advances that had already significantly impacted patient care. Roughly a third were new drugs, a third were devices, and a third were procedures. Some, like the rollback of HIV/AIDS, involved multiple modalities. 12 of my cases are random selections from the Fuchs and Sachs top 30 list. All exemplify protracted multiplayer advances and showcase the romance of progress. But they do not praise or preach. They include controversies about the overuse of antidepressants and expensive procedures. Great adventures, they remind us, require great risks and difficulties. In the coronary bypass case, for example, we encounter a German researcher who fails to meet the scientific expectations of his boss, loses his job, switches from surgery to urology, joins the military, and becomes a prisoner of war. Eventually, he gets a Nobel Prize, but can never secure a professorship because he has not finished his PhD. The boss of the surgeon who performs the first successful bypass forbids him from doing another. An Argentinian, who then does many bypasses at the Cleveland Clinic and comes to be known as the father of the surgery, ends up committing suicide after the institute he starts in his homeland cannot pay its bills. Two other cases that are not on the Fuchs and Sachs list cover advances that are still works in progress. One is on CAR-T cell therapy. Very cutting edge, very expensive, great results, but not in wide use yet. The other, fecal transplants, is low tech, also highly promising for some indications, but also far from widespread use. The point of these cases is to see what lessons and patterns gleaned from proven advances might be applied to emerging advances. Finally, to wrap up the course, I have a case history of an inspiring advance that is also not on the Fuchs and Sachs list. This is the story of the modern hospice movement that was led by Dame Cicely Saunders, who also created the specialty of palliative medicine. My materials include a 27-page overview note. It highlights the techniques as well as the spirit of protracted multiplayer progress by and for the many. Besides the course which is up and running, I now have a template for writing and teaching case histories of transformative advances. The template could be used to learn about advances in any number of fields: engineering, urban development, business, nursing, any kind of transformative multiplayer progress. To recapitulate where I am, the goal of my Transformative Advances course is to cultivate and broaden attitudes, knowledge, and skills, emphasizing the romance and adventure of progress. The course relies primarily on case histories and case discussions. The cases are freely downloadable. I will eagerly share teaching materials with other faculty. The medical case histories provide a template to write and teach about other kinds of transformative advances. Now on to how I got here. It has taken me more than 10 years to get to this point. As I will describe next, my journey has been very ant-like, very serendipitous. I started this project about 12 years ago because I was depressed with where the academy was going. Colleagues disdained practical hands-on knowledge. Practical advances, they believed, resulted mainly from applying scientific knowledge. Good business practice was simply the application of social science. Other colleagues ignored material progress and material advances. Redistribution and social justice were their be-all and end-all goals. But please, without medical advances, what would equal access to healthcare practically mean? Affordable bloodletting for all? Without a green revolution, food security or equal access to food simply means widespread hunger, shortages, and rationing, as I saw growing up in India. I was finding the intellectual climate corrosive. Universities were reverting to their ancestral tradition of doctrinal enforcement. I had no interest or capacity to fight these battles. I started a seminar on productive knowledge, but paradoxically, studying the foundations of practice was too abstract for most students. Then, quite by accident, I turned my attention to medical advances. Although my late mother was an eminent cancer researcher and my sister is an oncologist, I have no medical training. But I had studied entrepreneurs who had started ventures in many domains. I had a strong hunch that healthcare innovation was avoidably ineffective and slow To follow up on that hunch, I decided to study exceptional cases where medical innovation had delivered the goods. Instead of wallowing in innumerable cases of failed and fizzled efforts, I would focus on outliers, the so-called positive deviants. I have long studied successful outliers, exceptional cases. I've written 2 reasonably successful books, The Origin and Evolution of New Businesses and The Venturesome Economy. Both are based on in-depth studies of exceptional entrepreneurs and ventures. For an academic, studying outliers can be dangerous, career-limiting. Many social scientists hate my kind of research. They demand statistics that abstract away from specific cases and contexts, and they just absolutely hate studying unrepresentative exceptional cases. That's just anecdata. I'm convinced these are unwarranted prejudices. If you want to become a better tennis player, go observe Federer and Djokovic. If you want to become an artist, even an avant-garde artist like Picasso, study great art. If you want to do good scientific research, study classic scientific papers. But that's an argument for another day. Regardless, this ant had by then, don't ask how, secured a chaired professorship with lifetime tenure. I could work 24/7 on anything I pleased. I decided to study 100 cases of successful medical advances. I'd start with a pilot of 10 cases drawn from Fuchs and Sox's top 30 list. David Rue, a co-founder of Silver Lake, very generously agreed to fund the pilot without any formal proposal. Dave is entrepreneurial and visionary. With Dave's gift in hand, I placed the project at Harvard Business School, recruited an HBS collaborator, and hired a diligent postdoc researcher. We were off to the races. Case writing was extremely slow. I wanted concise, readable histories that were also multi-period and multiplayer. But we had no model or template for writing the cases. There are excellent medical history books, but no concise case histories. Dave's $250,000 ran out. Another friend contributed $50,000. That kept us going for a bit. Eventually, we had 10 case histories in hand. We posted them on SSRN as working papers, but no university press would publish them as a book. We want an argument, we want a thesis, they said. Engaging inspirational stories weren't good enough for them. Nitin Noria, then Dean of Harvard Business School, offered to hire me as a visiting professor to teach the cases as an elective course. I immediately jumped on the offer, of course. Reality soon hit. There was a serious mismatch between standard HBS case teaching and my case histories. HBS cases have protagonists who face a decision at the end of the case. Our cases had no protagonist, they had an ensemble cast, and no decision that normally anchors the case discussion. They covered decades of up and down development. I asked HBS friends how I might teach such case histories. They said, no, it can't be done. I consulted Wharton's legendary Sid Winter. Sid said, you should welcome the opportunity to contest that strong HBS convention about the pedagogical use of a quote case. That schema does 2 kinds of violence to the realities of decision. It distorts the way the passage of time affects decisions by overemphasizing the notion of critical decision points, and it distorts the way organizations work by overemphasizing the role of individual decision makers. I'm not saying, of course, there are no examples of situations that conform relatively well to this HBS stereotype, but I think the proportion is relatively small. Thanks, Sid, but pray tell me how. Sid said, I don't know, I don't teach cases. Fortunately, Jan Rifkin, head of Harvard's MBA program, had a brilliant idea. Why not insert questions within your cases? Something like, before reading on, please write down in less than 10 words what you found surprising or striking in what you just read. You can then organize your class discussions around their responses. Jan's suggestion was a breakthrough. It allowed me to turn historical tales into teaching materials. I'd been warned that as a new to HBS teacher teaching a new course, I would not get large enrollments, and I duly did not. But the students who took my course were splendid, and somehow, judging from the comments they wrote in their evaluations, it worked. It certainly far exceeded my expectations. Sadly, this again wasn't my lived happily ever after ending. The powers that be at HBS said, "Thank you very much. The course may have done well for a first-time course, but we won't continue it. You may have spent 10 years of your life on the project. It's fine if you don't want to be paid to continue teaching it. We don't care. Good luck in finding another home." My then employer, the Fletcher School, said no, as did another half a dozen places. Luckily, Columbia's Mailman School of Public Health said yes, if I found funding. Overheads included, that would be X million dollars, please. Long story short, Len Blavatnik, industrialist and philanthropist, who had taken my entrepreneurship course at HBS in 1988, said, "Sure," within a minute of a brief email request from me. Without Len's generosity, I would not be talking to you today. Just as without Dave Rue's gift, I could not have started my project. Thank you, Len. Thank you, Dave. I am truly grateful. My goal is to disseminate the course and its model widely. I want to teach the course in as many places as will have me and I physically can. I don't need to be paid. But as I have repeatedly found, schools don't jump at offers of free teaching from outsiders. I have to recruit insiders. To encourage faculty at other schools to use my case histories, I am writing detailed teaching notes. I have PowerPoint slides which are practically as good as teaching notes. I will eagerly give the slides to anybody who wants to teach the materials. Yet, while the slides are largely self-explanatory, their effectiveness may depend on my personal commentary and discussion. Similarly, I have brief lecturettes in the form of slides. These too would benefit from being written up as standalone notes. Perhaps I might weave the notes into a comprehensive book on productive knowledge. Parenthetically, after every book I've written, I've resolved never to write another one. Perhaps I'll stick to my resolve this time, perhaps not. Looking even further ahead, I'd like to offer workshops to teach other teachers how to teach their cases. Similarly, I want to disseminate the case writing model by organizing case writing workshops. My most challenging legacy ambition is to institutionalize the sympathetic study and teaching of progress. Whitman's powerful play, to which many can contribute a verse, demands much more appreciation and understanding. Unfortunately, discourse in the public sphere and on university campuses is neglectful or downright hostile. Material progress is often treated as a soulless, mercenary enterprise that increases inequality and injustice. Meanwhile, angry disputes rage over politics, race, or geopolitics. As an antidote, I want to help form a collaborative, a consortium, dedicated to transformative advances or simply progress. Can I answer any questions?
Who are you hoping will employ your students? What are you hoping they will do?
If I look back at my own MBA days, what many classmates and I did out of school had almost nothing to do with what we did later on in life. Yet our educational experience, largely case-based, was transformative in ways we didn't understand. It was transformative at a visceral level rather than at a technical level. When I was young, I didn't see the value of visceral learning. I'm now convinced that stories make a visceral impression which lasts a lifetime. My course therefore puts stories ahead of techniques. As I emphasize in my book on uncertainty, progress requires imagining a state which exists just in your mind. But convincing yourself that your imagined future is feasible and desirable isn't enough. You have to persuade people who are skeptical. And you can't rely just on facts and objective evidence. You need imaginative discourse to align imaginations. You have to make things up, at least somewhat. But it can't be complete fantasy. Finding the right balance is a skill which I believe case histories and case discussions can help cultivate. And it's a skill that has enduring, lifelong value.
Progress can be very ideologically or culturally defined. So what do you mean by progress?
That's a really difficult question, and for me a really important question. I could define progress as irreversible change which the consensus decides is for the better. But how does one assess the consensus opinion? What weight does one place on a minority dissenting view? What about changes in the consensus view? There was a time when radical mastectomy was considered a great advance in the treatment of breast cancer. A Nobel Prize in medicine was once awarded for lobotomy. Numerous constructs defy unambiguous specification. Yet, ambiguity isn't a reason to abandon the study of progress. Practically speaking, there are workarounds and palliatives. First, consider the context. Improving calorie intake is progress in impoverished countries with severe malnutrition. In many Western populations, increasing calorie intake is a problem, not progress. Second, accept that just as context can change, so can the consensus view of what is in advance. Many considered abstract art to be an abomination when it appeared. No longer, it's mainstream. Conversely, once popular rational city planning that tore down classic structures is now considered a disaster. That shouldn't stop us from studying how rationalist city planning emerged. Third, examine uncontroversial, clear-cut cases of progress. It's hard to argue with anesthesia curing ulcers or eradicating smallpox and polio. Electrification and mobile telephony may have their drawbacks, but who really wants to reverse either? You may prefer more bicycle or pedestrian transport, but it's hard to object to safer and more energy-efficient vehicles. Finally, and most importantly, focus. Don't aim for a universal theory or account of progress. I am mainly interested in material advances and technological advances and their role in human flourishing. This is not to ignore the costs of material progress or the unjust distribution of its benefits. We should certainly consider a more just society a contribution to human flourishing. Freeing slaves was unquestionable, clear-cut progress. But justice as the primary goal is outside my scope, as are debates about what is just. One should do what one can. Material progress is challenge enough for this ant. Thank you for your attention, and goodbye.